We get stuck in the idea that to pull all-nighters and grind like that is the goal, when actually it's the mean. It's that kind of despair of, oh my God, I've got to get up. It's all on me to make this happen, but I'm not sure if I can do it today. What it comes from is prolonged, unrelieved stress. That's the definition of burnout.
Scott Anderson built 9 businesses, sold 6, and still woke up one day totally drained, burned out, and done. But instead of walking away, he built a powerful system, the Burnout Breakthrough Method, that helps founders and entrepreneurs design businesses that fuel them instead of draining them.
We had a guy take a sabbatical for 6 months and came back even more exhausted than before, because it feels like if I stop doing these things, my business will fail and then my life will fail. The question is, if it's possible to recover from burnout, what else is possible?
When you think about founders kind of building their first business, like what are some of the red flags do you see right away that you're like, you're going to get to burnout?
Yeah. Well, and it's taken me, I wish I was a quick learner. It's taken me 9 businesses to kind of discover what I know. I think it's more necessity than anything else. But when we start businesses, and especially when we're younger, we have to bootstrap things, and we don't have the budget maybe to create a system, at least initially, that scales, that has staff, that has SOPs, et cetera. So we not only wear all the hats, but we perform a lot of tasks that we're not good at. And that's kind of the recipe for burnout, really. And the first signs of it are the number one sort of canary in the coal mine is an exhaustion that doesn't go away. It's, what we found about most burnouts is that they're perfectionists and they don't set very good boundaries. So they wear all the hats and it's as long as everything's perfect, they're happy. And the combination of those two things does lead to burnout.
Is it similar to the exhaustion you feel when you have small kids in the house? Because I'm
Well, it
always
doesn't
tired.
help. Doesn't help, right? Yeah. And a lot of, I had 4 little kids under 5 at one point, and yikes. That's absolutely, but yeah, it's the kind of fatigue that when you wake up in the morning expecting to wake up refreshed, you wake up just as tired as when you went to bed. It reminds me, I often think of the Bill Murray movie Groundhog's Day, where he wakes up at 6:30 a.m. with the clock radio going off with Sonny and Cher singing "I Got You, Babe" or whatever.
Right.
But it's that kind of despair of, oh my God, I've got to get up and it's all on me to make this happen, but I'm not sure if I can do it today. And the real fear is one day I won't be able to answer the bell. One day I won't be able to get out of bed. Then what happens?
Right. Yeah. I'm curious, do you see more of this burnout happening with those who are entrepreneurs in their own business or those who are working in, call it 9 to 5, or whatever the hours are for somebody else?
I see it. I think people who are in 9 to 5 businesses have, entrepreneurs, as you know so well from your own experience. We're kind of unusual people, and we've never, met a challenge that we couldn't overcome. There's kind of a boundless and sometimes borders on masochism, kind of an optimistic attitude. But burnout occurs in both venues, and we work with both entrepreneurs and business owners as well as top executives. It's a little bit different. The entrepreneur has more control. They don't necessarily think they do, but they actually have a little bit more control.
Yeah.
But it happens in both camps.
In more control in which way?
Well, if you're an entrepreneur, then theoretically you can change everything about your business. It may not
Yeah.
feel like you can, but you really can. Whereas if you're an executive with the business, the problem there often is that you have all of the responsibility, but only a fraction of the authority. And if you're a uber responsible person, but you really don't have the authority 100%, that's, and you're a perfectionist, that
Right.
that definitely leads to burnout.
And I'm curious about that because I've seen that, probably lived a bit of it myself too. And there is this different thing I feel like sometimes, but this is where you, with your experience, can correct me if I'm wrong, that at least when it is your own business, there is this different sense of you are building something. There's something where the outcome is still theoretically yours. You could still look at it and be like, well, at least hopefully in the end here, I'm going to have a business to sell. Where sometimes in corporate, America, or the, 9 to 5s, you don't have that same thing. So you can't connect it to as strong of a why, if you want to call it that, or something else. So that's why I was curious if it seemed like it appeared more in one than the other. But I also know entrepreneurs are pushing themselves extremely hard too. So I'm guessing that balances it out some.
Well, the entrepreneurial personality, we do a lot of personality and performance preference testing for our clients to help them ensure that they hire the right people for the right jobs in terms of psychological temperament and in terms of preferences. And entrepreneurs are definitely, a group unto themselves. There is a huge
Yeah.
risk tolerance and a huge desire to do it yourself, to be independent. Otherwise, we might have corporate jobs, but there's this tremendous desire to make something new and to do it yourself, and also to move at a pace that very few people are willing to work at or need to work at. So it's definitely for entrepreneurs, it's a special blend of things. When you compound that though with a perfectionism and with a reluctance or even an inability to delegate or to scale. And that's usually the point that I meet a lot of our entrepreneurs is they've scaled the business or they've grown the business to whatever that threshold is, $1 million in sales or 5 million in sales, but they hit that ceiling and
Yeah.
there appears to be no way to break through. And so they do all of their usual tricks that have gotten them to this point that ought to work, and they aren't working. And so what they usually do is the two knobs are work harder and worry more, and and that leads to burnout if those are the only
Right.
knobs you're adjusting.
If you like what you're seeing and you want to see more, be sure to click on the like button, subscribe to our channel, and click on the bell. It lets YouTube know you want to support the This Is the Way podcast, and it helps spread the word, and we greatly appreciate it. And now, back to the episode.
Interesting. Work harder and or worry more. Okay.
To kind of touch on a little bit of what Michael said from a personal experience, during my Disney tenure, for about 5 years of that, I had a startup on the side. And, the goal of it was never to be having two full-time jobs. It was always, when are we going to get to a point where it can turn into, its own, big company that I was running? It never got to that point, but I was having so much fun and I was so passionate about the project that I never felt burnout. And I
Ah,
reflected on this a lot because, I would have my 9, 10 hour days at Disney. I would wake up, 5 a.m. I was on with our offshore team for like 3 hours, 3.5 hours, get home. I was on with the offshore or, local teams, 7 to 10. And then on the weekends, it was all about, the startup. And I never felt burnout because I was enjoying it so much.
sure.
And so sharing that experience, I want to just get your reaction on, does passion play a role in reducing burnout from your experience and clients that you work with?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the juice for entrepreneurs. This is why we do it. It's to be able to make something and grow something and to realize a vision. I mean, it is very much an artistic kind of an endeavor. And that's really you just hit the bullseye, Art, and I think in terms of what motivates most entrepreneurs. It certainly has me. And why we tend a lot of us to be serial entrepreneurs is because there is that juice or that excitement that you don't get any other way. Where it begins to, or it can lead to burnout is if we find that, there are a lot of practical things that start to find their way into our lives. If we have little children around, for example, and we suddenly realize, oh God, I have to feed them. And in fact, maybe I have to provide college educations for all these little people, and also for a lot of my clients, the question can come down to, do I succeed at work or succeed at home? But it feels like it's a pick one scenario, sort of an existential question. And if your partner, your spouse asks you a question like, or comments that you're with us, but you're not present. If you've ever heard anybody say that, then you know you're in deep shit. And you've, you're going to have to make some choices. But it feels like a zero sum game, or it can.
Yeah.
I have to either succeed in my business or my career or succeed at home, but it doesn't seem like I can do both. And yet, most of us, want both.
How did that look for you though? Because when you look at the nine businesses
Yeah.
uh, that you had, it's like, did you feel yourself hitting burnout through each of them in different ways, or did you only feel it at the end when in a
It
certain?
was really the last business that I owned with some fantastic business partners was an advertising agency, and let me just parenthetically say that, an advertising agency is a crazy business. You have to be out of your mind in retrospect, to do that. But I loved it. The excitement of it was, and the risk. I had such great risk tolerance, but every day you were one phone call away from losing your biggest client and losing half your revenue, let's say. So it's not field for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
What happened to me was I just got to a point where, and we kind of hit a plateau in terms of revenue, and I was just hitting my head against that ceiling and couldn't seem to break through. The other part of it was that I realized that in a lot of ways, I had reached a point where I wanted to do different things. And I didn't really have the chutzpah to declare that to my partners and just say, look, I was really wanting to pursue coaching, for example, and writing. And, in retrospect, what I should have done was just to declare that to my partners and tell them, look, this is what I need to do. But so I was kind of in a box of my own, a prison of my own making. I had great partners, a great business, and everything else. But, I found that so often what happens is that sometimes the good can be the enemy of the best, as they say. And what was a perfect solution 10 years ago or 5 years ago may not be right for you today at this stage of life. And yet, owning this business, having my name on the door, my name on the building, etc., was very alluring and addictive, really. And I knew that I needed to do something different, but to abandon what felt like security was very hard to do, especially with 4 little Andersons roaming around, needing to get fed and so forth.
Wow. Well, would you say then that burnout and anxiety would be considered partners, or can you have one without the other?
Well, it's related for sure. And one of the things that I did that I wanted to pursue was to go back to graduate school and become a licensed mental health therapist, in part because of a PTSD program I started for military families.
Okay.
And in going through that training, one of the things that I found was that burnout is discussed, but it's not. There isn't a protocol for burnout. There is for anxiety. There are lots of bulletproof gold standard treatments for anxiety, but burnout is a little bit different, and part of it is that, if you're in a toxic workplace or I don't know, a racist or misogynistic or somehow toxic workplace, then I always advise my clients to run away screaming. Life is too short. If you're really in a terrible spot, then leave, pull the cord. Life is too short. But my experience is, particularly with entrepreneurs and high achievement people in general, and this isn't very popular to say, but this has really been my experience, is that we cause our own burnout. And by that, we don't do it intentionally, of course, but we get to a place where we kind of want it all. We want to have everything at work, we want to have everything at home. We don't want to make hard choices. We want to have everything. There's kind of an illusion, particularly in America, that you can have it all. And but what happens over time is that you don't really want it all, you know? There's some things that you know enough about yourself that you don't want anymore, and I found that a lot of the cause of my own burnout was just insisting that I have all of it, that I have everything. Anyway, the what it comes from is prolonged, unrelieved stress. That's the definition of burnout,
Okay.
and for the most part, we cause our own.
Interesting. Yeah. And I was curious with that because, and I think about this often again with the workplace and some of my previous experience there, but like I had worked with some people who literally had those attacks, panic
Panic
attacks.
attacks,
And
yeah.
yeah. And where in those scenarios, like I remember, one where somebody had mentioned to me, like they were literally in their car and they couldn't like move, like their body, like they were just in this point based on how they were feeling. And I think about that at the time and how that has a little bit more of a clear label where people feel like that can happen, that's a thing.
Yeah.
Whereas burnout, I feel like sometimes sits in this category where people, I don't know, it feels like a label that doesn't truly feel, I don't want to say real to some. Burnout is real to some, but
Yeah.
what I mean is that one just feels like it's more acceptable, and the other one feels like, okay, get over it or do this sort of thing. Like it's not as deep. I don't know if I'm explaining that very
Oh,
well.
yeah. No, I think that's such a good point. And, especially when the grind is so celebrated in America, it's sort of a red badge of courage that you're pulling all-nighters and all of that. That's really celebrated, as if pulling all-nighters is an end in itself, that it's something worth having, right? mean, after a while, you learn that's the last thing you wanna do, and that's the problem is that sometimes in our culture, we get stuck in the idea that to pull all-nighters and grind like that is the goal, when actually it's the means, and hopefully it's short-lived.
Right?
But back to the idea of, is burnout even a real thing? So the World Health Organization has defined burnout as a bona fide disorder that affects currently, according to the Gallup poll, 40% of the American workforce, where people
Wow.
report that they are always or mostly feeling burned out. Now, what burned out? And in fact, I'll put a link in the show notes, or I'll send it to you for an online assessment, a free online assessment that you can
Great.
that anyone can take. But it identifies the specific markers of burnout, and the markers are these. Basically, the first one is this kind of exhaustion, bone tired exhaustion, that a good night's sleep does not resolve, or a vacation. We find a lot of our clients taking vacations, thinking that'll be the answer, returning just as exhausted, or even worse, taking a sabbatical. For we had a guy take a sabbatical for 6 months and came back even more exhausted than before.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's a response to stress, and what it really boils down to is there's the symptom of unrelieved exhaustion. The other one is, though, having a wide range of interpersonal problems. I saw this, that I was behaving badly with my business partners, and it was sort of blaming them for this exhaustion and
Mm.
for this anxiety and depression I was feeling. There's a tendency with depression to blame others, whether it's our customers, our coworkers, our investors, what have you. The deep cynicism and resentment, and you'll see this in the online burnout assessment, is one of the telltales of burnouts. So it is an actual real thing, and as defined by the World Health Organization, and there are fortunately some real solutions for it as well.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Is there any physical, besides the exhaustion,
Yeah.
which is physical, but are there any other physical signs? The reason why I ask is what I've noticed about myself personally. There was a period of time where I had this strange, like, cough, but it wasn't a cough. It was as if I was trying to exhale. And I went through doctors, ENTs, and nobody can tell me what was wrong. Eventually, what I think I figured out is that stress somehow is causing postnasal drip for me, and the postnasal drip was causing that cough. As soon as I kind of eliminated a few of those things that were causing stress, that whole thing went away.
Yeah.
So I
Very common. Very common for stress to cause, and, what burnout is unrelieved stress, and, we sometimes think, especially in America, that every 50 weeks we take 2 weeks off and that should do it. But that's not how, most of our research has gone into what really does relieve stress. And, what the science says is that the time to relieve stress is right now while you're feeling stress. So, for example, if you were in a near miss car accident, your body would react appropriately by a shot of adrenaline and cortisol, neuropinephrine, dopamine, all kinds of different stress hormones would be released all at once, so that you would have the resources to save yourself from an accident. And let's say, hopefully, it's a near miss accident. And then 90 seconds after that, as you drive down the road, most of those cortisol levels will go back to a static state, back to the normal state. The problem with burnout is that we sort of get into this superstition that we need to be in that stressed out state all the time to perform at a adequate level. And in fact, it's very much like an Olympic athlete who knows that recovery from exercise is as important as the exercise itself. So Olympic sprinters realize that unless they also have a recovery period with stretching or with ice or with heat or whatever, then they can tear muscles. But that the recovery piece is just as important as the workout piece. So what we have found, what the science says, and a big part of our program is to recover from stress in the moment, to notice that you are stressed when you're feeling stressed, and to actually let it go. We have a technique called the R&R technique, and I can provide a link for that as well. That is a very simple way to meet stress head on. But that's really the key to it is notice you're stressed, find it in your body, and it could be a tick like postnasal drip or lots of others, and then let it go in real time. Let it go right now. Whereas most of us think, well, I'll wait for 50 weeks and then while I'm on the
Right.
beach, I'll recover then.
Right. It's so interesting. Okay, so you have a method, for burnout that you leverage at this point. Is that correct? And if I'm not mistaken, I see a book
Yes.
behind you there too. They all
That's right.
related?
Yes. Correct. Yes, our process is called Burnout Breakthrough, and if anybody's interested, they can go to burnoutbreakthrough.com, but it's a process that we've worked on for the last 10 years. I started it working with entrepreneur clients in my therapy practice,
Mhm.
and we didn't find anything in the literature that really addressed burnout head on, and so we started to investigate, and try things to kind of eat our own cooking, if you will, and stumbled into techniques that are very effective, and over the last 10 years, we've sort of codified all of those simple practical practices into a system.
That is that kind of good segue. I'm assuming those are what's in your new book. So can you just share with us your
Sure.
new book and kind of what is covered in the book?
Sure. Thanks. Yeah. Well, the book is called You're Not Toast. And because we've heard so many I've had so many clients tell me I'm toast. And so it sounds like a permanent, irrevocable diagnosis. And, when I was burning out, I really thought that my life was over. I just thought, well, I'm not going to be able to be an entrepreneur anymore. I'm not going to be able to really live that life anymore. It's just over. But the fact is it's not over. You're not toast, and it's not a permanent condition. There is, however, we found a quick and permanent recovery available if you want it. And so, yeah, you're not toast is just it gives you the complete system that takes you step by step, very, very practical steps that even exhausted burnout people can do, that takes you through a process of first regaining your physical energy, and then secondly, really getting out of your head and into your life. So much of burnout is us listening to our thoughts and taking our thoughts very seriously. A lot of us, for example, have a thought that if I don't grind and pull all-nighters and all the rest of it, I won't succeed because that's what's helped me succeed in the past. So superstitiously, we hang on to these practices. And so the second phase is really to unlearn those things, which we can do in a quick, practical, but counterintuitive way. And then the third phase is about reestablishing values to replace all of the old ideas that were driving us in the past, typically perfectionism and not having very good boundaries, to establish values that will actually help you behave and perform at a much higher level. So many people figure if I stop being burnout, I'd have to be kind of a C plus student for the rest of my life,
Mhm.
and I don't want to live that way, especially entrepreneurs. But the fact is that life beyond burnout is so much more. So much more is possible.
Can you put that in the context of one of your clients and kind of how it
Perfect.
actually looked like for one of them?
Love to. Yeah, I was just as I was saying that, I was thinking of a client named Ethan, who's a wonderful guy who has a great insurance business outside of Philadelphia. And when I first met him, he was working 60 to 80 hours a week. He had 3 small kids he wasn't seeing at home. And his wife was asking or was making the statement, "You're present, but you're not with us," or "You're not present, you're with us, but you're not present." That kind of horrible question. But he just couldn't see a way out of it. It seemed like the only way to keep the wheels on the bus and to continue to feed these kids and keep his employees busy and all the rest of it was for him to work 6 or 7 days a week, 60 to 80 hours a week. He just didn't see, any other way to live his life or run his business. On the other hand, his energy was completely tapped out, and he was afraid, I have to keep doing this, but I can't keep doing this." And that's really the definition of burnout, the feeling that I have to continue at this unsustainable pace, but it's unsustainable. I can't do it. So it's that real jam. Anyway, the process we went through with Ethan, first of all, was to help him understand and use some energy tools that our clients would never meditate. They're too busy to meditate, but we take them through some mindfulness exercises that only take 5 seconds to do. The R&R process, for example, is a really good example. It only takes 5 seconds to do. And the other process that we take our clients through is to help them understand what their genius zone is, because so many of our clients, as I said, superstitiously are doing the things they did in the first or second year of their business, but now they're 5 or 10 years down the road. And so superstitiously, they're continuing to do the same things over and over. But when we ask them about their genius zone, what are the things that will move the needle farthest and fastest in your business? What is the 20% of your activity that generates 80% of your results? They list 2 or 3 things. It's visioning for the company, top to top relationships with your top customers, coaching your leadership team, things like that. But when I ask them, "How many hours a week do you spend doing that?" They usually report 0 or 1
Mhm.
or 5 or whatever. So we take them through this Genius Zone exercise so that we can reorganize their time and to go through a goal shedding exercise so that they can delegate or otherwise automate or get rid of tasks that other people can do better, faster, or cheaper. So in Ethan's case, he went from working 60 to 80 hours a week to now he works 2.5 days a week if he wants to. He takes vacations
Right.
whenever he wants to. He just bought a ski place in Breckenridge. He's going to spend most of the winter there. I hope that's my guidance for him anyway. But he can take vacations now whenever he wants. But again, now his business is better than ever. It's not that his business suffered. His business is better than ever. It doubled. His time with his family is he's got as much of it as he wants, and he can really be present when he's with them.
It, it, it's fascinating as you say that because in many ways there, I don't think people connect, burnout to, I don't know, what you just conveyed, meaning that, what you just conveyed, a lot of people would be like, well, I need a business coach or somebody to help me to come in and, look at my work differently. Now, but in essence, it is what you described at the same time, because when you are getting people to start thinking about what they want to focus on, it means they got to let go of the things they're not, which means greater delegation, as I'm picking up some of these pieces, the fact that he could work less hours, now, because he's spending his time in the core areas that he really enjoys, which then means he's probably a lot more productive in those things versus trying to spread himself so thin. It's just so interesting because that to me almost starts sounding like a business coach. It's kind of a hybrid here because you need it.
The other part of it is though that I mean, our clients are so smart, right? I mean, they're very much like you guys. They're really well read. They're really smart. They know they need to scale their business. It isn't that the idea of scaling is foreign to them. The problem is that we kinda get addicted to the the grind, and, I mean, and addicted is not too strong a word. We really kind of get addicted to the brain chemistry that we ourselves generate, and it just becomes even though intellectually we know we can't continue to operate like this, and it's not producing the results we want anyway, even though we know all of that, and we know we should scale, and we know we should, create more systems for our business, there's a very strong reluctance at a gut level to do that.
Yeah.
And that's really where the burnout breakthrough process comes in because so many people do know what they should do, but they can't do it. And it's breaking through that kind of, I don't know, denial or refusal
Yeah.
to because it feels like if I stop doing these things, my business will fail and then my life will fail. We know intellectually we have to make these changes, but it feels like the wheels are gonna fall off if I make these
Right.
changes.
It's a set of beliefs that need to be reprogrammed in some
Exactly.
way, which is I'm sure where that therapist side comes in. I have to ask that question too, is because how long ago did you go back to school to become a therapist?
I went back to school about 12 years ago, and
Okay.
I was starting a not-for-profit for military families that were recovering from post-traumatic stress disorder,
Yeah.
and, I was raising a lot of money for this program and realized I should know more about what I'm talking about. So I went back to school to get a
Yeah.
graduate degree in clinical counseling.
Incredible, because for some people alone, the idea of doing that, as they're, obviously into their career could feel like, uh, stressful
Right.
and lead to
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, if you resonate with that okay, so when I did this, I'm running an advertising agency, I've got 4 little kids, in
Yeah.
retrospect, I don't know why my wife didn't just completely leave me or shoot me, but to me, it seemed like, "Of course, go to graduate school, that seems like a great idea."
Yeah, right? That's crazy. Well, I'm curious here too, even as you joke about your wife in that way, and the story you shared about Ethan too, is it almost feels like here in some scenarios, and maybe this is what the test in some ways that you have could be, but it almost feels like both at home with the families, like there should be that hotline where they could call and be like, okay, my spouse is here where they need some help. I could see that they're doing it, or even in the workplace, because a good boss will see that individual who's feeling burnout, if they can't be that role to help coach them into that place where they could better, then they also need something like this. I don't know. I just, to me, it is. It feels like there should be some sort of a helpline people could call. And then maybe when somebody gets like, look, you know what, Scott, we've received 3 calls already about you. It's time.
Yeah. Well, it would be so great if we could be, and in a lot of ways, post-traumatic stress disorder and burnout are they're both a little taboo to talk about because it feels to some people, especially high performance people, it feels like that they're
Competitor.
I don't know, lazy or
Yeah.
I don't know, they don't have enough guts or whatever.
Hey, grind enough.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, what I'm hoping that the book will do and that our program does generally is to make burnout something it's a very practical thing. I mean, in a lot of ways, it has all these connotations, but the fact is there's enough science, a lot of science that tells us exactly what to do about it. And the solutions for it, thank God, are very practical. They're counterintuitive. They're not what we naturally do. Vacations and sabbaticals won't help unless you also do these other recovery techniques. But it really is something you can knock out quickly. We've got folks that in just 5 to 10 days are reporting, it's gone. The burnout is really gone. So you can
Wow.
really do this. But one of the reasons I appreciate being able to talk to you folks is to try to make this more of to have a conversation about it. This shouldn't be a taboo topic. It's something that we can really knock out, but we have to learn the science of it and have to understand the practical steps that will really resolve it.
Scott, I know that when kind of my days are busy and hectic, one of the first thing that's noticeably goes down the drain is my food intake and the quality of it. Is that something you cover as far as like
Yes.
how does nutrition and eating well contribute to the burnout or reversing of it?
Absolutely. Yeah, in 2 ways. That's a great question. I mean, the first thing that we ask our clients to do before they do anything else is to see a doctor for a complete exam. And
Mhm.
because most of our clients are too busy to do that. And just like they won't meditate, they also won't go to a doctor.
Yeah.
But we ask them to do this to rule out any other causes or
Right.
issues that might be happening. But what most of us tend to do is to guzzle basically sugar and caffeine or other stimulants, because what we're trying to do is to try we're under this delusion really that we have to maintain this peak level
Mhm.
of, I don't know, awareness and kind of agitation really in order to be able to merely survive. And so we do go to things that produce quick bursts of energy, whether it's sugar or chocolate or caffeine or what have you, carbohydrates. And so, yeah, diet definitely plays a role. One of the things that I hesitate to mention this because I think a lot of people turn off the podcast, but sugar is not our friend. and if we can reduce sugar, it'll really, really help.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that the sugar in itself, it's a fight we have in our family, especially because as my wife and I grew up, we grew up with those habits that's like, sadly, you start attaching treats and all these other things to the family events and all that, and then you associate that with, the joy, just like food in general. You can associate that with the joy of family and friends. So yeah, we have to do it. But for anybody who's turned off by any of this, I should say, my Starbucks. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, no,
yeah.
but it makes so much sense. It's just so darn hard because again, programming to change that
Yeah.
when people have done it for so long, and especially if those in your community and your circle are doing some of those similar things, it makes it that much harder to
The
change.
sugar reduction is really hard
Oh,
because it
boy.
just feels like and everything is
Yeah.
sugar, no matter what you touch.
By the way,
Oh, it is. It is. Sugar is cheap and people really like it, so we
yeah.
find it everywhere.
So I should say this too, because Art and I, we go pretty far back, and his family, Armenian, would go over to their house, very, the Mediterranean kind of diet, and like they had nuts and dried fruit out, which sure,
Yeah.
there's some sugar in that, but it's a different, it's not the processed
Complex
sugar.
carbohydrate.
Yeah, exactly. And then meanwhile, his recollect when we'd go to the Vegas buffet was me just getting all the desserts versus the regular foods, which he'd look at and be like, "What the heck?" So anyway, yeah, for some of us. So even when I hear Arton say that, I'm like, "Oh, I wish I had his sugar eating."
Right? Yeah.
So something you'd said on the Zone of Genius. Is it also possible? Because I feel like I've seen this, but maybe I'm wrong where it's not that people are doing tasks like your example with Ethan was that, he should be doing more of these other tasks that were actually more leadership like in the way that they're described. But I feel like I've seen some people who sometimes grow into these leadership roles and they actually miss doing the tasks that were not as I won't call them psychologically challenging, but there's this whole
Yeah,
thing with leadership, people, politics, and even those who might grow like their own business. And what they realize, man, maybe they like to be the technician. They don't actually want
sure,
to lead the business.
sure.
Is that
Absolutely.
reasonable? Have you seen that? Okay.
I have, and, with the beauty and the difference with being an entrepreneur, I guess, versus being a corporate, executive is that you have the freedom to do that.
Yeah.
What it really boils down to, and the process we take our clients through is, first and foremost, well, second, I guess, after we show them how to regain their energy, the second piece is to really identify what their values are today. So often, people at 40 sort of live their lives as if with the same values and the same assumptions and beliefs that they did when they were 20. So we ask them to really look at their values in a brand new way. And by values, I don't mean whether you're a good person or a bad person or morals. I mean more in terms of what makes life to you. What makes you really love your life. If you're an entrepreneur, you have a lot more control over what you do every day. And so, when we talk about genius zone, what we're really talking about is what do you love? And, if you love, for example, being on the manufacturing floor, then, that's great. We can sculpt your business in most cases to
Yeah.
compensate for that. But again, that's a kind of a luxury, if you will, that entrepreneurs have that their corporate counterparts don't usually have, at least not quite in the same way.
I love too, because I mean, when you just described that, I'm like, man, what a fulfilling job you have to be able to help people in that way. And I'm guessing that also probably had to do with as you were in the previous world before and had experienced some of these others, because some jobs are more thankless, for lack of a better way to put it. And some of them you truly get to see the transformation in like people. One of the things I felt when I was at both Disney and Netflix for me is that I'm so far from seeing the customer happiness. So what I look at is sometimes my own team, but then there's some limitations in there and what you can see in that. So like I love, what you are able to see here as I like it just sounds like such an amazing I'm sure you have your downsides of the gig too, but it sounds amazing what you're doing for people.
Well, it really is, I'm very grateful for sort of stumbling into this method and for helping people through it. But, when people say, as Ethan did, and really all of our clients at some point say, is that the burnout is gone. It's as if, it's just sort of one day they wake up and realize that it's gone. And that in itself, my personal experience with that was I just was incredibly grateful. I mean, I
Yeah.
thank God every day that that happened. But what's even more amazing, we actually have a graduate program called Beyond Burnout for people who have been through the Burnout Breakthrough Program. And in Beyond Burnout, the question is, if it's possible to recover from burnout, which feels like a death sentence, what else is possible? That's really the question. What else is possible?
Cool.
And, what I've seen in my clients and even in my own life has just been it's incredible, really, what else is possible. But it's
Yeah.
but it's much more even though I would have given anything to recover from burnout, it turns out that there's much, much more, ahead.
Would you say that for individuals who are newer to entrepreneurship, because some would argue and say, well, burnout in that scenario is part of the deal because the grind, like you gotta make up for the time now or not make up for the time, but you gotta
Yeah.
put it in, harder now so you can relax later. What advice would you have for those who are, they don't have revenue coming in at really, high numbers, like they might still be juggling a 9 to 5 and working on this. Is there a healthy way for them to do it?
Yeah, there really is, and in fact, for we work with a number of corporations, both entrepreneurial corporations and large corporations, on creating burnout prevention programs, and because there are a lot of best practices that people can do to not only recover but actually prevent burnout, and the key to it really is to first of all to recognize how people actually recover from stress and
Mhm.
that stress is or ought to be a cycle that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and we go through it completely. What most of us don't do that, however. Most of us sort of stay in this hyper vigilant state, which is also an attribute of post traumatic stress disorder. But we think we have to stay in this hyper vigilant state in order to be to merely do our jobs. So there are a lot of steps that people can use. In fact, it's the same steps exactly that people use to recover from burnout that we teach to help people prevent it from happening in the first place. And it's true, if you're grinding away and you're working 2 jobs at once, it's gonna tax your energy, but it doesn't have to result in burnout. That's really something else entirely. You may be tired, but you'll recover from that if you're young enough. If you're young enough.
Longer recovery time as you get older.
To change the tone a little bit, Scott, being a serial entrepreneur that you have been, if you were to start a business today, what would that be?
Well, what's really fun is the Burnout Breakthrough program is a business that's come out of our executive coaching program, and we've been doing it now for several years. What's fun is that I've got 2 of my kids, speaking of those little kids, they're now all grown up, and they're in the business with me, and it is really, really fun. They're so talented and enthusiastic, and they're so much better at so many things than I am, especially when it comes to technology, social media, even just understanding Gen Y and Gen Z. They understand that generation so much better and can apply these principles in a way that is much more readily accepted and understood. So that's part of what I'm doing. I mean, one of the things I really see for Gen Y and Gen Z kids is that to be able to control your own destiny is a really good thing if you can do it. To be an entrepreneur, if you have the I don't know, the chutzpah and maybe the insanity to pursue it, it really is a good way to live, especially if you understand how to avoid burnout. It's much more sustainable and much more fun if you could just understand how the human body responds to stress.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I think regardless whether somebody is following a 9 to 5 or whether they're not, I mean, I think there's a lot that ties back to the mindset thing that you said before. So many people come out of school with a mentality and a learning that is not necessarily cohesive to entrepreneurship at times. So
Yeah.
I do think a lot of that comes in, the reprogramming once more for people to think about that. And, one of the things we're trying here as we homeschool our kids is very much that, like thinking about it that way. And I was talking to a neighbor the other day too. And for him, college isn't necessarily on the books for his kids unless, like there's a specific one of those degrees that really,
Yes.
need it. And as he said, he goes, no, right now for his kids, instead of going to college, every time they have an interest in something, he's like, great. Now, what you need to do is you need to go find somebody who's willing to let you work under them for, 3
Exactly.
months at least, and then figure out from there, which is usually incredible because to do that, you have to find an entrepreneur who's usually willing to take you under their wing and do it in that direction. Because large corporations see that as too risky, or they want you coming straight into an internship with an MBA or something else like that. But
Exactly.
anyway, I think there's a lot of hope there for people too, but I think it's similarly, the school system was set up a specific way and you come out with a specific type of programming, much like my programming I came out of with my love of sugar. I'll work on stuff.
Yes. Yes. My youngest son, Aiden, runs robotics for a Amazon distribution center,
Okay.
and he doesn't have a college education, but he's received an education running this robots program
Right.
that is, I mean, first of all, state of the art, and secondly, in incredible demand. But he was able to hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love hearing that. That's pretty incredible to get into that space. For Art and I, we came out of film school, but as soon as we did at the time, it was DVD that was just starting and blowing up. And it's like, nothing in film school prepared us for that because it was a brand new technology. So sometimes, you go through these steps and things like that, and it's like, it's just so you could say, "Yep, I've got this degree in the can," for whatever that means. So, I you said something earlier, and I'm wondering, maybe this is gonna be too hard to ask for, but you had mentioned the, approach for those who don't like, meditating, such as
Yeah.
myself, that is you said it's only like 5 seconds, R&R. Is
Yes.
that something that you can teach that quickly,
Sure,
or is that
sure. Yeah, I'll provide a link for the show notes, but this is basically how it works. And in a way, this is, I mean, this isn't a recovery plan in itself, but it's a good illustration of the kind of counterintuitive approach that really, really works when it comes to burnout. So, what most people do when they feel stressed is they either try to fix it or avoid it. And and we fix it maybe by flying into work. A lot of us flee anxiety by working more hours, by working harder.
Mm,
That was always my mo, and it drove me to burnout. Or we may avoid it by any number of ways, social media or, at a worse or a more destructive level with drugs or alcohol or spending or what have you. The thing that is very counterintuitive is that rather than avoid or fix the feeling of stress, which is uncomfortable, is to just be with it. And
Mm.
that's really what the R&R technique is all about. This came from an author named Michael Singer, a great, you may be aware of him. He wrote a book called The Untethered Soul. And there was a paragraph in his book that just really touched me, but it's about this idea of allowing yourself to just notice that you're feeling stressed and to just notice it in your body, not intellectually, but just scan your body and notice, as you said, I think it was Arden who
Mhm.
said that they had the kind of the post nasal drip kind of a thing or the
Yeah.
cough thing, right? I mean, that's the kind of thing that you might notice. So rather than try to figure out why am I feeling this way and how do I make it go away, to just scan your body and notice where you actually do feel the stress. Typically, it's between the neck and the navel. With most people, it tends to be in the stomach, sometimes over the heart or the sternum, sometimes in the shoulders. With women in particular, I notice that it's in the jaws and the throat and the tongue sometimes. Sometimes men, but more often women. And
Yeah.
the instruction of the R&R is simply just to notice it, to be with it, to spend a few seconds not trying to figure it out, not just notice it the way that a scientist would look at bacteria under a
Yep.
microscope, just to see what it is. And typically there's a tingling or a twinge, maybe there's a dull pain or ache, maybe there's heat, maybe whatever it is, just notice what you find. Then and be with it for just a couple of seconds without trying to fix it, without trying to avoid it, and without trying to figure a way out of it. So that's number 1. And that whole process that took me 2 minutes takes 2 seconds in this
Right.
process. Then inhale deeply through your nose, hold the breath for a beat, exhale deeply through your mouth, and, imagine a door opening over the energy that you're feeling. So whether it's in your throat or your sternum, your heart, your gut, imagine a door opening and the energy pouring out. Because that's really the life cycle of whatever stress we're feeling. It's meant to have a beginning and a middle and an end. Our bodies equip us with this survival instinct to see hopefully what really is dangerous, react to it. If it's not dangerous, then to let it go. But we don't typically go through all the way through that cycle. But if you can imagine opening the door wherever you feel that twinge and allowing it to pour out, I always think of a childhood memory of a summer fire hydrant that's just gushing out water. If you can visualize something like that. But this whole process takes 5 seconds. If you can take a mini vacation of 5 seconds multiple times during the day,
Right.
you'll be much better off than if you take a week's vacation every 50 weeks or God forbid, a sabbatical. But if you can remember to do this a couple of times during the day, this was all I had in the beginning. And it's not a complete solution in itself, but it does give you a practical experience with how the body is meant to react to stress and how the body is meant to self-heal and self-regulate.
That's fascinating. I've never heard of a 5-second version of this. On that note, I think I need to go try this right now.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah, so Scott, this has been fascinating, amazing. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
I think we're gonna run off try this. So anybody watching, you should just go right now, try this 5 second, and let's see how it works, and report back what you're feeling.
Scott, otherwise, for anybody who wants to reach out to you, I know you've kind of mentioned a
Sure.
couple of different ways, but would you mind just kind
Yeah.
of touching on those again?
You bet. Our website is called burnoutbreakthrough.com. And if you want to buy the book, You're Not Toast, it's $5, I think, or a little less. And but if you want to see the book, and our book contains the entire process from start to finish. It shows you exactly how to do this. So if you want to do that, go to burnoutbreakthrough.com. The other thing that we offer is if you somebody mentioned a one of you mentioned a hotline. We have sort of a hotline. If you're really feeling terrible and you want some help right now, we have a fast free call with our coaches. Just go to Fast Fix Call, fastfixcall.com, and you can schedule a 15-minute sort of a first aid visit with either me or one of our other coaches, maybe one of my kids. and we'll probably ask you to take a burnout assessment so we can understand your case specifically. But then we'll give you 2 or 3 things you could start using right now today that are customized to you. It's not a sales call. We're not trying to sell you anything, but what we are trying to do is to get you some help as fast as we can. So that's fastfixcall.com.
That's great. We love it. I mean, that just sounds like such an amazing thing that you've created there. And even in general with your book, like both of those things for me, it's like I have a few people I want to email that link to, or even maybe get that book for, because some of them are still in the denial stage of what you described, before, about where they haven't fully accepted, because not everybody looks at burnout as something that is
That's right.
is normal and okay. So, well, thank you, Scott.
My
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you.